Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to this month's LinkedIn live stream. Although you might be on Facebook, you might be on YouTube, we are everywhere. It's a multi-channel experience. If you've been joining us the past few months for these, you'll notice we have a very special guest today. Courtney Cruz, welcome to the
Hello, hello. Thank you. Good
Yeah,
to be with you.
we're glad to have you and bring your expertise to the conversation today because we definitely need it. As you all are getting tuned in and opening up your videos and getting settled in and all that sort of stuff, I would love it if you would open up a comment either in LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're tuning in from. Let us know two things. What organization are you from? And number two, where in the world are you tuning in from today? We'll watch those comments as they come in, give you some shout outs. It's always really fun for us to see just how far reaching this whole concept and idea of growing generosity is reaching, specifically using data, using research, using innovative tactics and techniques and strategies to grow giving and generosity. So jump in the comments and let us know what organization you're from and where you are tuning in from today. Uh, I'll introduce myself a little bit, and then Courtney will give you a chance to introduce yourself too. My name is Nathan Hill. I run what we call the Next After Institute, where I'm trying to look across all the different things that we're learning from our day-to-day work with organizations, growing digital programs, to experimentation and research, and try to understand kind of at a high level what works to actually grow giving and generosity, and then go share that with you all. And we're thrilled to have Courtney joining us today. Courtney, do you want to tell the folks listening in a little bit about yourself and what you spend every day doing?
Sure. Yeah. Courtney Cruz. I'm the executive vice president here at Next After. Actually, fun fact, Nathan and I have known each other for many, many years. Nathan and I go back actually to our days at a nonprofit. What are we at now? Maybe 10, 12 years, something like that.
Which is wild.
We were wee little ones back in the day. I think my first job, actually, when I knew you, I was like web content or something like that. Anyway, so Nathan, obviously, dear friend of mine, now a colleague, but my work at Next After really is focused on client success. I'm working within programs every single day for really kind of three purposes: to grow names, donors, and dollars. Pretty simple, but a bit more complex, of course, as you actually build and grow these intentional digital first fundraising programs. So I have the best job because I get to work with each and every one of our partners every single day and get to hear the challenges that they're faced with, try and find innovative solutions for it, and of course, really focus on testing and optimization to find what works. And I also like to add what doesn't work in fundraising to grow generosity for their programs. So
Love it. I was very close. I didn't have quite enough time. Very close to finding an old picture of us from putting it in today.
We looked a little different.
A little bit.
Yeah.
We'll save it for another one of these.
All right.
A few shout outs now that we've introduced ourselves. We'll introduce some of you. We've got Francis from Feeding America. We've got an anonymous LinkedIn user. At least it doesn't come through for me. That says Boys and Girls Club in Tarrant County, Texas. Shout out to you for joining. Steve Giddens in the Dallas area. Francis from Feeding America is in Illinois. Heyo, home state. Love that. We've got Kayla from Grace Adventures in Michigan. We've got Timothy Johnson from Weatherford, Texas. A lot of Texas representation today.
Right.
We've got Joy from Vancouver Island, working for Hollyburn Community Services Society. Awesome. Thank you to all of you for joining and for giving us some of your time today. I know it is hard to carve off time for learning and training and new ideas, and so we're really grateful for it. We want to make the best use of your time, which is why, without further ado, we're going to jump in. Today, we are going to bust some fundraising myths. We'll see if you agree that they're myths. Every myth has a certain level of truth to it. And so we're going to try to unpack why might these myths exist in our sector and in our space. And then we're going to bring some really concrete data to the table and talk about what's real, what's reality, what's actually true, what expectations should we have of our own programs when we think about growth. Before we dive into all of the data and the first myth, if you've never been on a Next After live stream before, just to sort of set the table, we really do one thing at Next After, which is that we help nonprofits grow digital fundraising. Now, the things that we learn in digital fundraising, they apply across every other channel. And so we're not just locked in and isolated just to emails and, Facebook ads or something like that. But we build programs with what we call a digital first mentality. We're using digital to sort of lead the communication strategy and using the learnings to inform every other channel so we can see growth across the board, which we'll unpack today. But we are a digital first agency doing everything from email campaigns and advertising and acquisition and retention and cultivation and stewardship and the whole works. And that's what Courtney spends every single day doing, is growing programs with a digital first mentality. We're also a research lab, and we conduct two types of research. First is that we conduct A/B tests, or running optimization to try to decode using statistical science what actually works to get more people to give and to say yes to being more generous. So we've run a lot of those experiments. I'll show you how many in just a moment. The other type of research that we sync up with our testing is what we call mystery donor research, where we go take the pulse of the nonprofit sector to try to understand what are nonprofits doing right now today to try and grow giving. And then we can test those ideas to see what actually works. And then ultimately, we are a training institute as well. And so we take everything we learn from growing programs every single day to all the research that we do, and we distill it down into things like this live stream, as well as other courses and other training opportunities, because we want to see giving and generosity grow. And the only way that we're going to do that is if we go share far and wide what we're learning with you so that we can all grow together. To date, and granted, this is out of date immediately at the screenshot. We're always running new experiments and tests, but we have nearly 7,200 online fundraising experiments in our internal library of experiments that we call Winston Knows. We can chat more about Winston maybe at a later date, but that number is growing every single day. And honestly, it ticks up probably at least every hour, if not more than that. So that's a little bit of a setting the table as to what we're talking about today. Every idea that we share is going to be based on not our kind of gut feeling and intuition, but we're trying to lean into what we've learned from nearly 7,200 online fundraising experiments. All that said, let's look at myth number one. Here's something that I have heard often, at least I've heard the mindset often. And Courtney, I'm curious to get your thoughts on if you've heard this and why you think this idea exists. But myth number one, online fundraising is primarily an investment in future donors. Courtney, what do you think? Is this true? Why do people think that it's true? And we'll unpack this with some concrete data, but I want to get your thoughts just kind of right off the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe the traditional thought of digital fundraising is like, oh, that's the young donors. That's not where we're at right now. We're fundraising for our older donors. That's who we're focused on. And so, historically, that's probably the mentality that there's been, is that the future donors is thinking about younger. And I know you'll go into some data here in a little bit, but when we think younger, I think that that's important to understand who we mean by younger. When we say younger, we're not talking like a 20-year-old, where a lot of folks' minds will go is when they think future donors, think, oh, the 20-something-year-olds. No, when we think younger, we're thinking like 55-year-olds, knowing that so many donors, the average age of donors for most organizations is in that 65 plus. And so when we think about future donors, we're thinking about the 55-year-olds, maybe 40-year-olds. That's stretching it a little bit. But from a fundraising perspective, it's really in that 55-year-olds range. And so I think that's really where it comes from, Nathan, is just that this perspective of online fundraising is for the young people, that's where they're at, that's where they're living. But as I'm sure you'll show us, there's some interesting data around that.
Totally. And it also seems, and this is not everyone, but oftentimes like online fundraising, from what I hear from people, it gets associated with things like social media, or just the general idea of like, we have a donation page on our website and that's kind of it. And the expectation is that, online giving is slowly growing and it's naturally or organically going to shift to become the majority, but that's not going to happen for another 15 to 20 years or something like that. So we should have a page set up. We should be on Facebook and maybe TikTok or something, and then the money's going to come 20 years down the road. But the reality is, as you're saying, the potential opportunity is not just in the future; it might actually be now.
Right.
So jump in here if you've got thoughts on these different kind of generations, because I think there's a lot of really interesting data. We've spent some time, and our good friend Greg spent a lot of time diving through lots of different reports, from Pew Research to Blackbaud reports and all sorts of things to go kind of assemble what you see in front of you, which is really trying to look at, based on all these sort of generational categories, looking at volume of giving and total gifts, total participation, and what percentage of actual revenue or overall giving comes from these generations, but also what are their preferred giving channels. And if we just zoom in on the top one here, the silent generation, these people are basically 80 years old or older. Interesting, they still represent a significant amount of giving. They represent about just over a quarter of all giving that is happening right now. And when we think about the silent generation, typically as we think about how they might give, we're thinking direct mail, we're thinking, one-to-one type of conversations. Maybe it's over the phone. We don't normally associate this group with a lot of digital activity. But what's really interesting is that 40% of people in this generation have a smartphone, and 37% of them are on Facebook. It's not an insignificant amount for a group of people that gives a quarter of the giving that's happening on an annual basis. And we'll talk about this kind of as we go. We'll show some case studies here today. But if someone is on their phone, period, especially on a platform like Facebook, they can be influenced by, your digital media, digital campaigns, any sort of digital interaction that they have. There's an opportunity to use that to influence how they might give. Even if they're never going to give to you online, you might be able to help influence them to give more in another channel, even if they never actually come through your online donation page. So I think that's really interesting about this generation. We don't give them enough credit, I think, for the digital interaction that they almost have to have just in everyday life today.
Well, and to that point, Nathan, I had read something, actually, I think it was in this research. It was had this quote from the research that said, like, for many seniors, being online and staying up to date with technology isn't a choice. It's an imperative, and that's really why. Like, I wouldn't say that an 80-year-old maybe is raising their hand and saying, like, I want all the technology, but they know that that's where everything is at, to stay up to date with life, everything going on around them, so they've been forced into technology. They've been forced into digital mediums, so, and that's really the story with not just, that generation, but as you're going to walk through these additional ones, it's very clear,
Well, let's go there, because I think sometimes when we talk about the baby boomer generation, we often, at least in my head, I think we often sort of upgrade them to sort of the silent generation and think they're much older than they really are. And so we don't give them enough credit for being very active online. And we'll look at some of those data points. But right off the top, I mean, the baby boomer generation represents 43% of giving. So that is the biggest slice of the pie that's available if you break it down by generations, as we are here. Interesting to note that this is probably the most multi-channel generation in terms of where they actually give, because many of them give online. Many of them give in person at events. Many of them will give through the mail and through more traditional channels. They're not just locked into one. They might give through a variety of different channels. And Courtney, to your point, this generation has, even though they maybe they weren't the target market like when the iPhone came out or something like that, but they had to adopt that technology to just live everyday life, especially when you think about, a lot of people in this generation are grandparents. And my lived experience, we live far away. My kids live far away from their grandparents, and you know what? They spend a lot of time on the iPad just over FaceTime chatting, and so they're very digitally, engaged. Even if they don't give in a digital channel, they're going to be significantly influenced by online activity. And to throw some more context around that, in this generation, baby boomers, 86% of them spend over 6 hours online every single day. On average, they have at least 5 devices in their home, and 82% of them are on a smartphone every single day.
Amazing.
So they're fully engaged. Even if they don't give through a digital platform, which many of them will, but even if they don't, they can be significantly influenced in how they give through other channels by the way that they engage.
I mean, my parents fall in this age range, and I think about, you know, the dynamics of my parents. I've got teenage boys, and so you know, they're on social and they've got their own devices now. And my son watched the show called The Social Dilemma. I think it's on Netflix or something like that. And he was just like shocked by that documentary. That he's like the technology police at our house. He's the oldest, the teenager, and he's the technology police. And when my mom and dad come to visit, my mom's on her phone more than any of us are. And my son will be like, Social Dilemma. And so I, even looking at those hours that you mentioned, that was like 6 hours or something like that on the devices. I was just talking with him last week about like how many hours I'm spending on my device. I'm like, I'm less, and I'm not in the boomer market, you know, I'm in our age range. And so it is interesting that it was forced on them, but they have, like, baby boomers have adopted it so much and so well that they probably use it even more than the younger demographic does. And maybe to that point is that the younger demographic is using it more for social things, the TikToks and the Snapchats and whatever else. I don't know all the, you know, the platforms out there now. Where my parents aren't on Snapchat or TikTok. At least I don't think they are. We could find out. You know, and they're actually they're reading things online. They're on Facebook to see what's going on in the neighborhood, you know? Yeah. And so their consumption of media is just so radically different from, you know, Generation Z, who we always are pointing our fingers at and saying, like, they're always on their devices. So anyways, just some interesting things in our family that I've, you know, recognized.
And that's certainly my same sort of lived experience. Is like, you know, almost all these generations are equally digitally connected. The way you consume media is very different.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're going to go measure on a total number of hours, it's probably actually very similar as we move down the board. Let's look at Gen X and millennials, and we'll kind of lump them together. Not to say that they're all the same, but interesting. And I like using this as a benchmark and kind of a line in the sand of when the iPhone was released. That's a big marker in my head of like when things really started to take off and shift into a very much a digital first sort of environment. Nearly half of today's donors, which would be Gen X and millennials, were 45 years old or younger when the iPhone came out. And so they would be the earliest adopters and also the target market because they had means to go buy an iPhone when it came out. So 31% of giving is represented by these groups that are either very early adopters of sort of this kind of digital first sort of mentality, very much digitally connected and plugged in, or, you know, came into adulthood right at sort of the advent of the digital age, if you will. And, you know, Gen X can sort of vary between a preferred giving channel of online or direct mail. Millennials is almost exclusively giving online. I certainly fall in that category. And the idea of like writing a check and putting in the mail is like, I have never done that. I will never do that. I will only give to you online. And why would I put my bank information in a little paper envelope and then put it in a box and just let it go? I would never do that. It's totally different.
Right. We were a trusting generation for a very long time. That is no longer.
no longer. And so that if you continue to move down the chart, then you get to Gen Z, and you just see we've got a lot of TBDs in here. And, you know, sort of there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot more data now coming out about Gen Z and their participation in philanthropy and giving and all of that. It will be really interesting to see in like 5 to 10 years when this whole generation moves fully into adulthood and into the workforce, you know, what this breaks down to. But the thing that we can certainly guarantee is that they have never known a time in life where they're not digitally connected. And so their preferred giving channel is going to be online or something that we don't even understand because we don't even know exists yet. But it certainly won't be direct mail. So back to our myth, if you will. Definitely an investment in digital is about the future, but it is very much about the present. I want to show this chart. This is from our digital first benchmark that we released back in March. If you want to go check that out, you can scan that QR code, or I think we can put the URL up, benchmarks.nextafter.com. But what we found is we're conducting this benchmark. We're looking at about 30 organizations that are using this sort of digital first approach to their fundraising. And a common thought about digital is like, well, if you go make a big investment in digital, are you just stealing money out of the offline bucket and moving it into the online bucket? And is it really what we want to be doing? Right. The reality is that these organizations using this sort of digital first approach are seeing something very different. They're seeing, look at this 5-year trajectory. The green is online, the yellow is offline. In terms of total volume, certainly green is lower than the yellow. Online has not eclipsed offline, but they're both growing. You can see over 5 years, online revenue has grown by 99%. But offline revenue is also growing in a dramatic fashion. It's growing by 36%, which is not small. It's really significant, but it's not like one is sort of eating the other one, or you're just switching places. They're both growing using this digital first mentality and strategy. And if you draw some like mental trend lines on that chart, they're going to come together in about 5 years if these trends continue to hold. So this mentality that like digital is about the future and it's way down the road, and donors aren't shifting that way yet, it's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years. The reality is coming a lot faster than you think. And if you have the right approach and the right strategy, it might actually fully shift in the next 5 years. And a lot of the growth that you want to see in your program is going to come from this digital first type of mentality. What do you think about those kind of growth rates and just the data you see in front of you, Courtney?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. It's really good to call out that, it's not that offline is dying and it's not growing. I think that's a huge part of this. Specific to the data that we're showing, as you had mentioned, these are, again, digital first organizations. I just want to call out the difference with them. Maybe then if we would look at this chart with non-digital first organizations, and we'll get to that.
If you want to compare to like a Giving USA report, you're looking at the whole industry. Very different, very different.
Very different. And the reason for that is that, we talked so much about the digital landscape constantly changing. Nathan, you and I have talked about, we were thinking back of like, when did Facebook come out? Like, when was Google popular? How all that happened? Like, that was in like 2006. And then now we're 18 years later. And I think Yahoo was like the biggest website in 2006. Facebook had launched. Now it's like, is Yahoo anymore? I don't know, maybe. But Google now has grown like some 50 billion users, and YouTube is king. And now grandma is on Facebook, like when it was used for like college email addresses. And so like, it has rapidly changed the digital landscape, and it constantly, not just like happening like overnight, it's like always constantly changing. And so as that shifts, as that changes, so has like the requirement for us as nonprofits and fundraisers to adopt like new standards in our tactics and our strategies. And that's really what has happened here, is that just as technology has shifted out in the marketplace of how people consume and use their devices and consume content, we have to understand how that is and align our tactics and strategies with that so that we can be more effective. We don't want to just like let digital and technology like happen to us and we just like catch the donations that come in. No, like we are intentionally, I think a couple things, investing in digital to adopt these new standards in our tactics and strategy. And then also like we're not afraid of testing and optimization. And that's really what is happening with the charts that we're seeing here. These organizations have a radically different approach in their fundraising. They're not just looking at digital as, catching those donations coming in and off their website. No, they're going after those intentionally, because they know how those donors respond and act and consume, and they're meeting them where they are. And then they're also giving them more of that same kind of content in the kind of way that they consume it. I think about, digital, you could think that you would want to just flip this switch and you shoot out a bunch of, what do they call them? Like e-blasts is what we used to call them. Like right when online fundraising kind of came out, it's like, let's get that e-blast out. Like, what? No, like, okay, they're emails. But even like some of that technology the terminology is so like techie. It's like, no, just because it's technology and it's digital, there's still a human on the other end. And so just as much as we change our tactics and strategies, we also have to understand how our platforms work, and that we're not just being this like targeting a digital audience in a way that we think. No, they're still humans. And so even being able to personalize and humanize our content and our messaging, and again, just really like meeting them where they're at. It's not a matter of like adjusting and changing, in such a radical way because digital is so different. No, it's like, be a human. It's just that you can do it at scale.
Totally. And to your point, I mean, the requirements on strategies and tactics have to change, but also the systems and the tools and the processes in order to have that personal interaction at scale requires a lot of new things that if you're just kind of throwing a little money at digital and hoping something sticks and preparing for the future, you're never going to see these results, but you have to make the intentional investment. We're going to jump next to talking specifically about the value of those online donors. But have we done enough here? Have we busted this one?
Yeah. Where's our like noises like? Bow, 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 bow.
You nailed it. We don't need a soundboard. Got it. We busted that one. I think if you disagree, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But I think we've busted that. Yes, it is about the future, but it's also very, very much about the present. And there's significant growth that can happen now with the right type of investment. All right, we're going to move a little faster on these ones. But myth number 2, online donors are not nearly as valuable as offline donors. Courtney, true or false?
That's not fair. I know the answer. If there is an answer to this, I will tell you this. This is something I hear all the time. And actually it's what we see in programs that we come in and work and partner with organizations with is there's a nervousness to invest in that area. And so I think that we talked about investing before, but it's like, hey, offline donors are valuable because that's where you've put your focus. That's where you've invested. What would happen if we invested in online at the same level? And again, there's a lot to kind of unpack here, but I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I do too. It's a very common mantra, and it's not just, one-off conversations. I see this type of thing shared on LinkedIn by other industry experts and people that you like. I would assume probably most people who are watching right now and listening right now, if you go look at your data, this might actually be true in your data, is that online donors do not give as much as offline donors. Yeah. We're going to look at some different data that is from these organizations that are putting this sort of digital first approach into action and seeing a radically different result. Digital doesn't live on the sidelines as something that like we hope it grows, but it's something that they're putting first and prioritizing in their communication. So here's what we see in the data, again, from this benchmark that we've referenced a few times. We're going to look at both revenue, and then we're going to look at average gift, and then we're going to look at gift frequency. All those are really important because, yeah, you could go sandbag in the offline channel and put a ton of investment and intentionality in online, and bam, you're going to see online revenue grow while harming offline. Again, the reality is that we're seeing both of these channels growing in a really significant way. So keep that in mind. As we look at revenue for new donors specifically, I'm going to pause there, put a pin in that for a second, because the reason we're looking at new donors and not the past 10 years of donors is that a lot of these organizations have started making these changes and putting these plays into action in the past few years. So if you're going to go look at the past 10, 15 lifetime history of a donor file, you're not going to see these same types of results. We need to look at a little bit tighter timeline to look at new donors that are coming in now and what does their behavior look like and what's the opportunity into the future. So what we're seeing from these digital first organizations is that new online donors are in fact more valuable in their first year than new offline donors. I'm going to just pause there and say that again. What we see in the data by employing a digital first mindset, which we can unpack a little bit more. I see some comments and questions about it, but new online donors are more valuable in their first year than a new offline donor by a significant margin. You see offline donors bringing in about 40% of new revenue, online bringing in nearly 60% of new revenue. The question is, well, how can that be? Are there just more of them and they just give less? And do they retain? Well, there's all these questions about it. Let's look at a little bit deeper. When we look at the average gift sizes of online versus offline new donors, this is looking at 2023 data, but also back to 2021, we see the same trend, is that online donors, when they give more than a new offline donor, and by a significant margin. You see in 2023, online donors had a 53% higher average gift size. New online donors had a 53% higher average gift size than new offline donors. So in total, there's more revenue coming in. But secondly, they're giving more when they give in terms of an average gift size level. And they're also giving more frequently. Your most likely donor, when you're employing a digital first approach, your most likely donor to give again in their first year is an online acquired donor. You can see new online donors are 21.8% more likely to give a second gift in their first year than a new offline donor. And this is not to beat up on the offline channel, not at all. They're both critical and important. And we looked at, the growth rates of both. They're both critical to work together harmoniously in sync. But what we're seeing is the shift is happening if you have the right strategy. New online donors, more likely to give again, which also means they're more likely to retain in the next year. We've seen that in our own benchmarking data as well. If someone gives that second gift in their first year, they have a higher likelihood of becoming a second-year donor and then a key multi-year donor. Your online acquired donors have the best chance of giving again into the next year, while also giving more right now. So back to our previous myth, it's about the present, not just the future, and they might actually be more valuable with the right strategy. I'll look at one case study here, and then Courtney, I want your thoughts on this overall now that we've unpacked some of the data. A multi-channel case study. In this experiment, this organization took a portion of their donors that they were going to mail and send some emails to, and they wanted to see what's the impact of these two different channels, and what's the impact if we put them together. So they split that file into 3 parts. Part 1, 1/3 of this file got just a direct mail appeal in the mail. And what they saw when they got the direct mail appeal was this portion of the file saw a 14.9% conversion rate when they sent them direct mail only. It's a pretty darn good direct mail campaign, by the way. 14+% conversion rate is solid. Now, for this second portion of the file, they only sent an email to. And what they saw was a 1.4% conversion rate. Not actually that bad for an email campaign, but obviously pales in comparison to the direct mail only campaign. And then what they wanted to see was basically kind of what we've talked about. Is one channel just sort of eating the other one? Are you just shifting where the money comes from and where the money goes? Or might they actually be better when they work together? And so this third portion of the file, they sent both a direct mail appeal to and an email appeal to. And what they saw was in total a 23.9% conversion rate. Regardless of if they gave offline or online, together, they saw a nearly 24% conversion rate. That is a 61% increase in conversion over sending a direct mail only campaign. The point here being, again, that these donors don't live in a bucket of online or offline. They're human beings, as you said, Courtney. They're humans that we're connecting with. And the reality, as we looked at with the sort of generational data, is regardless of which channel they give in, they're influenced by what's in front of them. And so if they're on their phone, they're going to be influenced by what they see, even if they write you a check and they stick it in the mail. Courtney, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, let me just reference the data points you've had, Nathan, around new online donors are worth more in their first year. Their average gift is 53% higher. And they're more likely to give again their second gift. I think going back to that digital first approach, this is where there's a lot of elements at play here. Again, we talk often about how everything has to work together. It's not about just like turning on your acquisition program. It's not about just sending emails. It's got to be a holistic, strategic approach. So know that the results that we're seeing are not just because they started sending some emails. There's a very comprehensive program at play there. But like maybe to make it a little bit more generalized, really what's happening here or at play is, I think, two factors around testing and experimentation. When I think about average gift, like an average gift, someone doesn't just magically give more online, versus offline. Lots of times in those programs, there's a lot of testing being done. And that could be testing in the way that you're communicating the impact of the gift and trying to understand the motivation of the donors. Again, online, digitally, you can test into that to see what works, what doesn't work, and have results back within a couple of days. If you start testing that offline, it's going to take 6 months to really see and understand the return and the impact of the thing that you tested. And so that's what's so fantastic about digital, is that you can just have this like low risk test, but learn so much to understand maybe motivations of the donors, or even understand like how can you get them to want to give more generously, to give that higher average gift. Is there a tactic that you could apply on the donation page that might inspire greater generosity? So you can see where testing is definitely at play in those organizations to try and understand what works to see greater generosity in their giving. And then agility. You talk about they're more likely to give again in their second gift. It has to come back to the ability to be agile in your program. Mm-hmm. Direct mail just doesn't afford you to do that. Digital does. And so I think about, we have this incredible stat. It's just like stuck with me since the moment that we uncovered it like 2 months ago, that a new donor is likely to retain into their second year at like 21%. That's the retention rate. If you can get a donor to give 2 gifts in their first year of giving, it doubles. It doubles. Now, imagine on the direct mail side, on the offline side, the work that it takes to get additional appeals out in market. How about even the expense that it takes to get additional appeals or opportunities to activate donors for that second gift in market? It takes so much work, so much resourcing. Where on the digital side, the agility of it is that I can put an email together, within an hour and get it out. I can target those donors with advertising or messaging that reminds them of the gift that they had. So then they're more likely to convert again downstream. So I think a huge part of the ability to have these numbers that these organizations are experiencing is around testing, optimization, and agility. And again, it's a comprehensive program. And what I love though most, Nathan, is in this case study that you showed is that, the digital first fundraising is not just about digital. Like, that is the power of digital, is to be able to drive other channels, to increase revenue in other channels as well, because you can test and optimize, because it's agile. And so it like lifts all sails. Right. When you get, digital out in market in front of offline donors as well. So it's just, the power of digital is significant. And I want to just make sure that we understand that it's not just to get more money in that digital bucket. The purpose, the intent is to drive revenue across the entire organization, to leverage digital to lift all channels, regardless of, how they were acquired or where they're giving.
Which comes back even to that kind of systems and processes, conversation we had a little bit earlier. We have to get out of this mindset where we just look at donors by buckets. And I see several questions in the chat of like, well, how are you defining an online donor? Is it just by giving channel? And yes, that's historically how we all have sort of defined it, is what channel did they come in from? Did they give on your website? Okay, they're an online donor. They're going to live in the online bucket. Did they come in and donate for the first time through direct mail? Okay, they're an offline donor, and they're going to live in the offline bucket forever. Maybe they switch if they give a certain amount in a different one or something, but they rarely switch because we rarely invite them to switch, because we don't often use a truly like multi-channel approach. And so it takes some work and some effort just to shift our mindset to not see these donors as they live online, they live offline, but as holistic people and use these channels in a way that's going to be most effective.
Well, and let me just say one more thing on that, and this is going to get a little spicy.
Bring it.
But it's not just that we change our perspective in that, donors are so linear and offline, or they're so linear and online, but that we as an organization do not care where that money comes in. That our program is holistic and that it's working together, regardless if they come in offline, online, wherever they come. But that is a like a principle thing that has to change as nonprofits, that we're not so hyper focused on this attribution of, oh, these are my donors. Not like they're our donors. Yeah. If we are in it for the mission to continue to move our work forward, then we should be working together to see greater generosity, to see more people give, regardless of channel. Okay, sorry.
I love it. Preach it, Courtney. I think we fully busted this one. I think that's pretty clear. We've got one more myth to tackle, and I think we can, I say we can do it quick, but we'll see where we go. Myth number 3, online donors. Sure, they're valuable. Yeah, they're valuable today. Okay, they give a little bit more than offline donors when they're new. They might give a little bit more frequently, but they don't retain as well as offline donors. Why do you think this is a common sort of saying or belief in our nonprofit world?
I just think that we have such a small view of like what digital really means. Honestly, I think that it goes back to everything that we've been talking about. Is we've put online or digital in this bucket and defined it as that is what it is, and that's challenging to like break down whatever thoughts you have on that until you get to experience it. It's like, I want to have everyone on LinkedIn who is, not in our digital first model here, like to go talk to someone who has implemented a digital first program, and they will tell you, that this is busted. Not to steal your thunder later, but this is not true, right? But again, it goes back to like they just haven't experienced yet. They haven't gotten to embrace the power of digital to really see what can happen. And it goes back to like agility and some of the stats that we've been talking through.
Yeah. And again, just like the last one, if you go look at your own data right now, it may suggest that this is true, that online donors don't retain as well as offline. But we're here to tell you that there's hope. Check it out. Here's what we found as we dive into the data with these again, this subset of about 30 organizations using a digital first approach. New online donors and new offline donors retain at almost the exact same rates.
Yay!
Switch a little bit year to year to year to year, but who cares? It's all marginal difference. You see back in 2021, the green line is digital, the yellow line is offline, the blue is the overall rate for new donors specifically. 2021, you can see that online is about 35.09, offline is 35.7. Marginal difference. Offline's winning, but just marginally. It's not significant. 2022, it's flipped. Online donors retain marginally better than offline donors. 2023, it's flipped again. Offline donors retain marginally better than an offline. 2024, maybe it'll flip again. We'll see. But I guarantee you it's not going to be that different. When you look at revenue retention, which is not a metric that we look at all the time, but it's a really critical one. You can look at the number of donors and how many will retain, but you can also look at how much new revenue did you acquire that you have to go find again next year. And we see the same trend. In fact, it's probably more in favor of online in these numbers. 2021, offline's winning by a little bit. 2022, online's winning by a little bit more. 2023, online's still winning. The differences are marginal. New online and new offline revenue retains at almost the same rates as well. And it might flip back and forth year over year, but it's a marginal difference. So I think just with that, we can go ahead and bust that myth. But I do want to share one more kind of multi-channel case study along all these same lines, just to show again that the people on the other end that are giving to our organizations, or we hope are going to give to our organizations, are people. They don't live in an offline bucket. They don't live in an online bucket. They're influenced by what's in front of them. I think this shows that very well, because this organization is running a year-end campaign, and they have a direct mail drop that hits, and basically they have a campaign where, you know, you can make a donation, and they're giving you sort of a free calendar. It's really nice. It's a beautiful calendar campaign. And it's a great thing that people want to keep and they want to use throughout the year. It's branded with the organization, so you kind of stay connected with them. And so they go send the direct mail campaign. They see a 3.8% conversion rate, and there's nothing else sort of going on to drive them to say yes, other than just the direct mail drop. That was for one half of the mailing list. The other half of the mailing list, they sent the same exact direct mail campaign, but they also ran Facebook ads, meta ads over the top of it, not trying to drive someone to give directly online. In fact, there's no real clear appeal. If you were to like zoom in on that copy and read it, there's no clear appeal in that copy. What it's actually doing is it's saying, hey, we just put something in the mail for you that you're going to want to open. And it runs a little bit after the direct mail drop happens too, as kind of a reminder that, hey, that thing that you got in your mailbox that's still sitting on your counter, you should take an action on it. And so it's just, you might call it brand advertising that's really just trying to get you to recognize that there's something that you should take an action on in your mailbox. And by running that ad campaign over the top, which doesn't cost a lot of money just to get some eyeballs on those types of ads, led to an 11% increase in donations during the year-end season for a direct mail campaign. That's a huge lift in your most critical giving season of the year. So digital can be incredibly powerful for those people that are never going to give to you via an online channel ever. Mm-hmm. It can be significantly powerful to lift the likelihood that they're going to respond to the direct mail drop that you just put in the mail.
That's great.
Courtney, what do you think?
I mean, I love it. I think the power of digital ads to whatever channel or audience that you're targeting is maybe a little bit underrated. I was just looking at another experiment where, again, the power of kind of this hitting people where they're at. We had this welcome series that was running. New names came onto the file, and we were onboarding them to say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. We'd love to have you a part of our work. And those welcome series are pretty standard. I mean, actually, we're going to be teaching on some of that at NEO. But what we did to kind of see, can we drive greater response and get a gift sooner from folks going through a welcome series if we targeted them with ads? So we target, part of the file going through that welcome series with ads. And there was no ask on it. It was like message reinforcement. It's just trying to be top of mind. Hey, this is who we are. That's what we're doing, all the things. Maybe there's a content offer, a resource or something like that. But by targeting those folks, even in a welcome series, so this is even like targeting digital efforts with digital efforts, they saw a decrease in the time to make a second gift by 42%.
Crazy.
That's wild to me. And then to your point, Nathan, like those kind of like awareness ads cost pennies to get in front of folks. Mm-hmm. And so, I understand that some of the, people on this webinar are like, hey, we don't have that budget. Like there are really cost-effective ways to drive greater response in maybe just your digital channel, maybe just your offline channel, whatever it might be, by targeting audiences, meeting them where they're at, and just being in front of them to remind them. And so I just wanted to like encourage people who are like, yes, I don't think we can do this. Where do I start? It's like, try some awareness ads, target your offline file through meta ads. You will see a difference. I don't know if we have one experiment in our library where that has, come back with a return that was negative. It only helps, and it could cost you maybe a couple $100 to even just start somewhere.
Yeah. That's the trick, is figuring out the scale of it, and, how much should you spend for how much reach and all that sort of stuff. But it's, being in front of someone more often is not going to hurt your results.
Right.
Certainly. So even putting a little test budget together, trying it out, seeing where it goes, measuring the results, it's going to be much more easier to justify it next time around if you see an 11% increase in donations or a 61% increase in donations like we saw earlier.
Yeah.
Have we sufficiently busted this one?
I think so.
I think I'm going to call it busted. Again, if you disagree, let us know in the comments, but I haven't seen anyone disagree yet. Just probing questions, wanting to know more, which we'll get to in just a moment. We've got about 10 minutes. We've no more myths today to go bust. We may come back and do another round of this at another point. What I want to leave you with, before we have some open time for questions is this. So we've put together a product that we call the mystery donor analysis. And, many of you have asked questions today about kind of what does digital first fundraising look like? What does it look like to make an investment? And the scale of that is wide. I mean, there's a lot of little things you can start with. There's a lot of low hanging fruit opportunities. There's 7,188 things that we have learned from testing and experimentation that you can learn from and start to apply directly in your program today without spending any additional money on advertising and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots to be learned and there's lots of ways to grow. Granted, then on the other end, there's all sorts of bigger digital initiatives that do take some more time and investment and financial investment to see larger growth often into the future. What we want to help you do today with this mystery donor analysis is get a jump start and learn from the 7,000 plus experiments that we've run. We don't want you to start from zero and have to go build your own full testing library on your own. We want you to test, but we want you to start in a better place than we started, 12 plus years ago when we started kind of on this journey. And so what this mystery donor analysis does is we'll work with you we'll become a mystery donor. We'll experience everything that your donor experiences as they come to your website. They try to figure out, where do I go to give? What's the process look like? What is the donation page experience like? Is there confusion? Is there friction? Is there anxiety? What are all the different things that you can try, test, and implement to improve results? So we'll go map out that whole donation pathway, show you the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the opportunities for growth. And it's all practical things that you can go install on your website and on your pages. So ultimately you walk away with a plan of things to test, a plan of things to just do and just implement to see growth, as well as some potential initiatives that you can go run over the coming couple of months, especially as we lead into the year-end season, to prepare to have hopefully the best year-end season that you've ever had. So we would love to work with you on this mystery donor analysis. Just a couple more thoughts on that. There's plenty of organizations that we've walked through with this analysis that are seeing pretty tremendous results from it. So you can see many of those on your screen, and you can see there's a wide variety of scale. There's very large organizations, and there's organizations that are kind of younger or newer or regionally focused that can all benefit from these learnings from over 7,000 plus experiments. One more thing for you, looking at one of those organizations, they went through this analysis and had some pretty incredible results, because before they went through it, they had tried to run a recurring giving acquisition campaign, trying to grow their recurring giving file. They had built sort of a branded initiative around sustainer giving, recurring giving, ran this whole campaign, and they saw zero results. What a blow to spend so much time and effort and energy, building a campaign and then not seeing any results. They went through this mystery donor analysis. They upgraded a couple of tools along the way as well, but they then applied everything that they learned from this analysis to their next recurring giving campaign. And what they saw was 40 new donors, totaling $30,000 in new annual revenue from the one campaign, let alone everything else that they're going to do over the coming months and years based on these learnings. So whether you're a large organization or you're a small organization, or you've got a huge national reach, or you've got a very local reach, you'll find benefit from this. So scan the QR code. You can read more about it. You can book a time with me. We can talk more to see if it's a good fit for you. I'll also be sending you a note in your LinkedIn mail with a link to check out more of this, and we can follow up there as well. So I'll leave that up on the screen. You can go ahead and scan the QR code if you want to find out more information. Now, we have a little bit of time for questions. Courtney, do you see anything in the chat that you really want to dive in on? There's plenty of them. Where should we start? Or we just cherry pick one and we'll go?
Yeah, maybe cherry pick.
Let's go. Okay. This one from Jessica. I like this question as it came in. I saw it and we touched on it a little bit, but she says, are those conversion rates normal, particularly when we showed that first direct mail multi-channel case study? She said that their conversion rates with direct mail and email are about 7%. 23.9 sounds fantastic, which I would agree. Going from a 7 to a 23% would be awesome. Courtney, any context that you want to share just around like how to think about conversion rates? Because they're not going to be the same all the time for every organization, for every campaign, for every donor segment. So how should you think about that when you're measuring conversion rates in a campaign?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think everyone would say that 23.9 is fantastic. I was looking at that too, like, oh, that's really good. I don't have response rates on direct mail like off the top of my head right now. I can tell you conversion rate, our benchmark for conversion rate on the average donation page is, well, it's not great. It's actually 13.6 is our latest benchmark on conversion rate for donation pages. But again, like the context of everything is really important. We say that conversion rate is for your average donation page. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of donation pages. Again, I'll speak specific to digital. If you think about year end, a specific campaign, motivation of your donors is so much higher. And so your conversion rate is going to be so much higher because they're a bit more motivated to give. Where your general donation page, you've got traffic coming from everywhere. It's like Disneyland. Like everyone's just trying to figure out, coming in from like email and organic search and paid social, organics, you name it. You've got traffic coming from all over. So the motivation of folks coming to that page is all over the place. So it maybe makes sense that conversion rate is a bit lower. And then if you think about like a acquisition donation page, those are usually a little bit higher as well, because again, motivation is higher. So I think that the context in which you look at your conversion rate is critical, because it all depends on where they're coming from, what their motivation is, what did they see, hear, read before they got there to impact their motivation and likelihood to give.
Yeah. Great. That's great thoughts. One other thought on that too, just kind of related to just benchmarking metrics in general. There's a temptation, I think, sometimes when we go look at benchmarks to say, oh, I don't quite meet that standard, and that should be my target. There's a tremendous amount of value in looking at a benchmark to see where do I compare. If you're just content sort of to be at the benchmark, then you're kind of content to just be at the status quo, which is never going to lead to growth. I would outside of the ideas you can get from benchmarking, I would prefer that you go look at your own results and your own current metrics. And if 7% is kind of your average for the year for a conversion rate on a direct mail campaign, how do you get that to 8? What can you try? What can you do different? What can you test in the next round, the next direct mail drop, to see if you can increase that? Because I mean, jumping from a 7 to a 23.9 is a huge jump. And there's so much context in there that's different for you versus that organization that ran that test. So considering your own metrics, what can I do today? What can I do in the next campaign that I can test or try differently to try to move the
One quick call out on that too, Nathan, is just that, again, I think about organizations trying to find funding to invest in digital or, intentional efforts around digital is like, let's say you go from 7 to 8% or 9%, like how much additional revenue is that? That's a great story to share with, whoever it is that you need to share that with to get their signature on some additional budget to invest in. Like, what if we did this all the time? Mm-hmm. Imagine the additional revenue that can come in. And so that's where you can use testing as your superpower to really like lean into digital and experimentation to get maybe additional resources, whatever that is, more people, more platforms, different technology, more media, you name it, but use that data to help drive those decisions.
Love it. We've got a bunch of other questions we could dive into. I think we've touched on most of them, at least a little bit. One I want to go back to while we have about 60 seconds left technically here is probably the first question that really came in. It just says, hey, can you give a few examples of what it means to invest in digital? We've talked a lot about running, Facebook ads over a direct mail campaign. We've talked about adding email. Is that it? Is that all it is? Courtney, what are just some, and we could spend the next hour talking what this looks like. What are a few examples of what that might mean to make an investment in a digital program?
Yeah, I mean, investment digitally could be in media. So you're paying, you're investing in Facebook ads or whatever it is to target something. That's pretty straightforward. You're to get ads up and running. There's bigger like structural conversations that probably are on the investment side as well, is like does our platform that we're using for email, donations, our CRMs, all of those things, do they allow us to be agile? Do they allow us to embrace a digital first, fundraising program? Those are like the big questions on investment, but they're critical as you look at really kind of diving in on the digital first approach. And then there's even, we didn't even get into this, but as a thing is like sometimes even staffing is a huge thing. Do you have any resources or anyone at the organization who can help kind of drive this digital first approach? So I know that's not really where they're probably wanting us to go, but I think that those are also critical in a digital first program. In addition to how much are you investing in media for acquisition, retention, and reactivation efforts. So.
And for those that have this question, again, if you go check out that benchmarks.nextstafford.com, there's a lot more data there, first of all, that you might find interesting. And it kind of walks through some larger examples of things that digital first organizations are doing to see this growth. So that may be helpful there as well. A note on the staffing thing, investing in digital doesn't just mean hiring like someone who's Gen Z to go run your social media.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than that. So I want to make that clear point. We are at the end of our time. Thank you so much to everyone for joining and giving us a full hour of your day today. We're grateful for it, and we hope it was well worth it. If you got any thoughts or questions, feel free to just shoot me a note. Find me on LinkedIn. I'll try to send you a connection here soon. But feel free to send me a note. You can do the same with Courtney as well. I'm sure she'd be happy to chat too. Absolutely. Again, if you want to dive deeper, we would love to walk through this mystery donor analysis with you and help you find those concrete things that you can go install and implement today to start seeing increases in both email acquisition as well as donations, especially as we head into this year-end season, which is coming real quick, which is shocking. Courtney, thank you so much. Thank you for all your wisdom and expertise and sharing it with all of us today. We're really grateful.